Hello and welcome to Run It Back on the Raptors Republic Network. I'm your host, Zulfi Shake, joined by Kyle Ramrun this time. No Cody Wiles this week. He is busy, unfortunately. But me and Kyle are going to hold it down. How you doing, Kyle?
Doing good, doing good. Another week of Raptors basketball, more downs than ups, but we're here to talk about it.
Yeah, man. We are always here to talk about it. Rain, shine, snow. A lot of snow this week in Toronto, which caught me off guard a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit. But we are absolutely here to talk about it. And like you said, Kyle, it was another tough week in terms of wins and losses. It was actually a winless week for the Raptors. By my account, it is the sixth time this year the Raptors have gone an entire week without winning. And so that was 4 games and 4 L's. We'll quickly recap the schedule here for you. Now, the silver lining was that the games did get better as the week progressed. Double-digit losses to the Bucks and Knicks were followed up by a pretty great effort, all things considered, against the NBA leading Cavaliers, and then a generally spirited but less competitive effort against the Detroit Pistons. All in all, the Raptors went 0-4 this week and are now 8-31 for the year. They're currently 14th in the East, and for the lottery watchers, they are now tied with the New Orleans Pelicans for the second worst record in the NBA, just a half game ahead of the Wizards. Now, we'll get into our weekly takeaways as usual to break it all down and also talk about some recent trade chatter, the 905 report, and then take a peek at next week's schedule. With that being said, let's get into it, boys. Kyle, I'll start with you. Obviously, another winless week, tough schedule that didn't really go the Raptors' way. There was some good, some bad, but what really stood out to you out of this week?
Honestly, I know you and Cody talked about it about 2 weeks ago when I wasn't here on that one episode. I've just noticed after that, I think it was the Knicks loss, the Darko chatter started up again. Like I don't know if you've noticed it, but it's really ramped up for me on my timeline. I've even just posted a TikTok on the Raptors Republic channel today, and they were saying, okay, maybe it's time to axe Darko, maybe it's time to get rid of Darko. And I don't know why, like all of a sudden, everyone just agreed. It's like we waited for it to get a fully healthy lineup. We saw one loss, and then they're just saying, all right, it's time for curtains on Darko. I don't think it is. I've been honestly thinking about this, and it's just like we haven't given him a fair shake. And I know I briefly touched on this last week, but it's like you get handed a team, the team's not healthy. You haven't played with the fully healthy starting lineup for how long now, and you finally get them back, and now we're figuring out, okay, what pieces need to be inserted into the starting lineup? What pieces should be traded? How does this offense work? How does this defense work? And it's like people are just looking at it as a whole thing and not kind of breaking it down the way we look at it. It's like, oh yeah, we lost this week, cut the axe on him. I don't know. I was going to throw it to you and say, when do you think it's time to actually start having these conversations about Darko? Because I don't think it should even be this season.
Yeah, I'm with you. Long story short, Darko Rakovic shouldn't be fired this season, and I don't think he should be fired next season unless things continue to be really ugly, if I'm being honest with you. But I think all of this is stemming from the fact that, like, there's just been some really ugly performances piling up. And then you get the roster back healthy for the most part against the Brooklyn Nets. You get a win, great. But then you follow that up with duds against the Magic, another dud against the Bucks. You're kind of there for a little bit against the Knicks, and then you lay a dud at the end of the day. And the thing with Darko Rajakovic is that, like, so far he's proving really well at being a developmental coach, which is kind of what his like moniker was coming to this team, right? He's worked with a lot of players and helped them get better in his time as an assistant. And then you see that with the Raptors individually. But like at a certain point, that does need to translate into being a good in-game coach as well. We see how he struggled with challenges. We see how some of the rotations and adjustments don't click all the time. Granted, he only has so much talent to work with. And to your point, Kyle, like again, haven't been fully healthy for the most part. This is really the healthiest the Raptors have been. But then, like, you kind of want to see some more in that regard, or at least some progression there to see that he can be that coach that's not just a developmental guy. Because right now, the way that things are trending, I think like it looks like Darko could be a great transitional coach. And I don't want to just pin him in that. I don't want to put him in a box. But like again, I go back to a guy like Steven Silas with the Houston Rockets. He was kind of there, brought up younger guys like Alperen Sengun, Jalen Green. And then when they're ready to turn the corner, add some pieces and get serious, they switch to Ime Udoka.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say that Darko can't be a Mark Daigneault. And like Lewis mentioned this on Twitter a couple games ago too, that some of those OKC teams early on that won like 20, 25 games had some really, really ugly losses under Daigneault. And I'm sure his name was kind of going through the mud at that time too. So this could just be the early goings of that for Darko as well. But you kind of want to see some of those baby steps happening. And at some points you have, but in other points you haven't. So that's where I'm at with this. I think it's still too early to tell, but I kind of get where the sentiment is
Mm.
coming from a little bit.
And I'm not saying like he should be our permanent coach, going into the future forever, right? Like obviously I'm just saying that only this season we haven't really given him a fair shake. It's kind of my stance on IQ. I don't think IQ will be our point guard of the future going like in the championship or whenever we're contending, Like I don't think he's our point guard of the future. But does that mean we should get rid of him right now? No. We gotta help the team develop, we gotta grow, we gotta learn these guys, we gotta know what we need to. It's like say we get Cooper Flag, but we've never had a fully healthy team. How do we know if he's even going to work in this system? How do we know if he's going to work under Darko's system? Like, or do we just start building around him and Scotty? We don't know these things until we get a good sample size. And I feel like it's just too early to be calling the axe on someone's job. And getting a new coach isn't just going to make this team magically better. I don't know. That's just where I was going.
Yeah, look, what I will say is that like these last couple of weeks haven't helped his chances of
Mhm.
surviving beyond the next season. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Like it's the truth. Like when you get blown out consistently, it's not the fact that you're losing. We knew that one of the goals of this season was to try to secure a foundational piece through the draft lottery,
Mhm.
right? We knew that was probably something this team was trying to do. Masai said as much when he said they're rebuilding, but it's how you go about those losses. Some of that has been out of his control. A lot of it actually, when you look at the injuries and the inconsistency with the rotation, but some of it just has to be better efforts and more consistency out of this lineup. And when you don't get that, and you don't get the competitive like level at a good rate, then it starts to bring up this question of like, are you losing the locker room? Is your voice being tuned out by
Mhm.
players? We don't know if that's true. By all accounts, players say they love Darko, and again, they are developing under him individually, but the results at some point are just going to be against you, regardless of how good
Mhm.
of a person you are. So I think that's what's kind of starting to happen, where people are starting to look at these losses and how they're happening, and it's starting to raise that question. But then again, you look against the Cavaliers, they put out a kick-ass effort against the league's best offense and defense, the league's best team, quite frankly. And you kind of see that this Raptors team does have potential. It's saying, well, how do you capture that and kind of get some consistency out of it? It doesn't have to be in wins, but it has to be an effort. And that's Darko's job now. Like as the coach, you have to find ways to capture that effort
Mhm.
consistently.
Exactly. And I totally agree too. Like, we're not gonna say he's the championship coach. And honestly, like I do say, like if we're at the end of next season and still kind of remains up, then yeah, then we can give him the axe. We could try somebody new. And if we're kind of turning a new leaf, getting a new direction, then we can go with someone else. But that's what he's here for. He's here to develop these young players. He's here to implement a system. He's here to have the players under control because like you can see what happens when a coach doesn't have control of the locker room, how bad it can get. People can just run wild and the team, it just looks bad on everybody. So I feel like the players respect him. He has their respect. He is the head of this team, and we shouldn't just be like, yeah, fire Darko. That's it. That's the end of the season. Because again, like another coach isn't going to be magically make this team better. Look at like when JJ Redick joined the Lakers, like they made no roster improvements. Like yeah, he can only coach so much, but if the team is the same at the end of the day, it's not really going to get better. But I feel like enough Darko talk. Like what else happened in this season?
Yeah, I think the thing that stood out for me this
Mm,
week that we've been kind of talking about for a while, and you brought it up a little bit about health
yeah.
and this team, is just that like the biggest thing was getting this starting group together, getting a sample size.
Hmm.
Last week, Cody said he kind of put an arbitrary number on it and said 200 minutes of a sample size for this team, and he wants to see
Hmm.
that. And that's kind of what I took out from this week, that we got more of a meteor sample from this starting group. And like the truth is the results have been kind of mixed, and for the most part it hasn't looked all that great, so there's growing pains. And that's my takeaway, is that we're hoping that as they continue to play together, it'll start making more sense of getting better, because right now it hasn't looked all that good, to be quite honest. The sample size now, the numbers are, it's around 62 minutes that they played together, the starting group of Barnes, Barrett, Quickly, Grady Dick, and Jakob Pertl. Their net rating in that span is minus 18.6. The offensive rating is 106. They're shooting 31% from three as a group on the offense. And the defense is just insanely much worse. Like, again, we all knew they weren't going to be a great defensive lineup, but the numbers are kind of staggering, to be honest. The defensive rating of that starting unit is 124.8 per 100
Hmm.
possessions. The opponents are shooting 62% from the field, 47% from three-point line against the starting unit. Like, those are just astronomical numbers. And so it's a small sample, but it's still not great to see. You want to kind of see them clean that stuff up. My big thing is they need to find an identity together. I'm going to chalk a lot of that up to them starting to figure it out. Again, we saw some decent efforts against the Cavaliers, namely, but you can also see how these guys just aren't used to playing with each other. And a lot of that is because of the injuries. So, like,
Mhm.
when RJ Barrett was kind of leading the show and doing his thing with Grady Dick next to him, Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel quickly weren't there. So then the pecking order was different. The scouting report was different. And then Scotty Barnes comes back. There's still no Emmanuel quickly. So he's a main ball handler. RJ gets to be secondary creator. Grady Dick's game scales down here or there. Like, those guys haven't been able to really fit next to each other. And we saw it. I think against the Pistons, there was a point where Scotty Barnes for a couple possessions was just in the corner, just standing there. He's your main like scorer. He's your best player. Like, this is a guy you need to be involved, but he just didn't know where to be in these possessions. Against the Cavaliers, there's a point where I think he just had his hands on his hips at one point above the break because Emmanuel quickly was running the pick and roll and Scotty Barnes was just kind of watching and vice versa. So you're seeing these guys just trying to learn how to play with each other. So far through the small sample, the honest answer is it hasn't looked great. But this is a winless team in the last week. They've only won 8 games all year, so obviously it's not going to look that great regardless. But you're hoping that once they start getting more acclimated to each other, that's going to start looking better, and that's what I want to keep watching as the week goes.
Yeah, that for me, I gotta agree too. Like, just see watching that Pistons game too, it just felt like it was kind of all over the place. Like when I go back and look at the box score, you look at RJ Barrett shot 4 for 16, Emmanuel Quickly 7 for 20, and it just feels like we're again growing pains and we're figuring out what we want to do. But I feel like I don't know. I know he's not a traditional point guard, but I kind of want to see Emmanuel Quickly kind of take on less of a scoring role and more of that facilitating role, I should say. But it's like it's kind of hard because again, he is more of a scorer than a facilitator, and that's what I was thinking too. I was like, I feel like the Raptors need more of a traditional point guard. I know you brought it up way back when, like someone like what Kyle Lowry was to this team. And you know what? Because I feel like you have RJ Barrett that can score, Ray Dick that can score, Scotty Barnes that can score, and it feels just too many scores, not enough passing. I should say is kind of just bothering me right now with the team. But I guess like we got to see what happens going forward if we're gonna make any moves coming with the trade deadline coming up so soon.
Yeah, with Emmanuel quickly, like, and that, I would say, like, it kind of has to play off each other, right? Like,
Yeah.
the scoring opens up the passing opens up the scoring. Like, we look at some of the best point guards in the league today, whether it's Luka Doncic, Steph Curry,
Mhm.
Trey Young, whoever it may be, Tyrese Halliburton. Like, a lot of them are score first, and the
Mhm.
scoring is what opens up their passing touch, and vice versa. It just plays off each other really well. But going back to this lineup, I think the interesting thing is it's like you kind of want them to be that energy creator. And right now, you're not getting that from the starting lineup.
Mhm.
Against the Pistons, quite frankly, the bench unit is what kept them in that game. That game does not stay as close as it even was for the most part up until the last, was it 4 minutes where the Raptors went scoreless? Like, the bench unit of Jamal Shed, Bruce Brown, and Chris Boucher, quite frankly, kept them in that game. Chris Boucher was insane. He went nuclear, and we're going to talk about him in a sec. But that's the thing. Like, this bench unit can't be the one that's leading the charge most nights. And it hasn't been. But this week, it was for big chunks of it. And, like, the starting unit is heavily invested in when it comes to especially the barbecue trio. And they just have to win their minutes.
Mhm.
That's the reality of it. Like,
Mhm.
and if they're not, and they don't continue to win their minutes, then the front office has to start reevaluating this rebuild and what steps they're taking very quickly, because that's what's going to happen. Because if you're building around these guys to be the core, they have to be productive at winning their minutes.
You know, that's something Samson brought up too, and I think in that the most recent episode of Pull Up Trey, he's saying when these guys are on the floor, they're losing majority of their minutes, and it's just something. If they can't get it together soon, we're going to be in really big trouble here too. And like I saw, he was also talking about the seriousness of the team, and he said himself he didn't want to be like old man yells at cloud, but you had like Davion Mitchell, he was clapping in Garland's face, and then immediately fell over on the screen, and then IQ just tried to skip back after hitting a three, but then the pass just flew over his head, and it was just like is I don't want to say the team's unserious, but it's like we're losing games. We gotta get back on defense. And I don't want to sound again to like old man yells at cloud, but there's a lot of tooling the team needs to do. There's a lot of I'd see it gelling and just getting a little bit more serious. Like I'm not against fun, but not when the ball is in the air, you know?
Yeah, this is a young team that is
Mhm.
showing signs of how young they are. Like that,
Yeah.
that's what all that stuff is. Again, that stuff in some ways energizes your team
Mhm.
and energizes the crowd. And I get that. You guys are right. And I think Samson's big point was like, don't do it in live ball situations. Like,
Yeah,
have
yeah.
fun, but be smart about it. Like, if you are clapping and a ball gets skipped over your head and then you foul the guy as he scores as the clock is expiring in the quarter, like, you just weren't paying attention. And that's the thing. Like, pay attention. Don't do it in live ball situations. But like, again, a young team, that's what's going to come with that. They're going to have to figure that out. Hopefully they can get a hold on that. But I want to go back to, we already mentioned him, Chris Boucher.
Mhm.
He's an interesting person to talk about this week because his name has come up in a lot of trade chatter while he's quite frankly been balling. This week has been incredible for him. I think we have the stats here, Kyle, if you're able to pull them up for us. Chris
Yes.
Boucher this week has been he's scoring through the 4 games 15.7 points, 5 rebounds. He's only doing it in 17 minutes, and from the field he shot 75%, 73% from the 3-point line, and plus 8.4 rating. He went nuclear for a bit there in the first half against the Pistons, and then that happened in the midst of NBA insider Ian Begley. He reported that several teams have Boucher on their trade radar with the deadline less than a month away. And then specifically, the Denver Nuggets are a fan of Chris Boucher, the French forward, or I guess the Montreal forward. He's Canadian after all. But yeah, Kyle, are you buying this? Like, is Chris Boucher a name that you think is coming up during the trade deadline and all these rumors?
If you told me Bruce Brown, I would have believed you more. But Chris Boucher, I've seen him going off, and the one thing I said to my friend immediately, I was like, "Oh, he's getting his trade value up. Like this has to be what this is." It's like I feel like the two players you got to move is Boucher and Bruce Brown at the deadline. I feel like at this point they can give more to contending teams than what they can give to us, and we can get so much back. I don't know what the trade packages would look like for someone like Boucher, but I do believe with his current level of play and what he's been doing recently that yeah, his name would come up, to some teams that maybe need a backup big, maybe need something just to help out. And someone like Bruce Brown too. I don't know if you saw they said the Lakers were interested in him for a Rui Bruce Brown trade. I think they threw like a second round pick in there. But how do you feel about Rui potentially joining the team?
It'd be fun. I think he's like what 26 or
Mhm.
25, somewhere around there. He has good size. I don't know where exactly he fits because you still have a young, undersized, like a small ball big in Jonathan Mobo who's
Mhm.
there. Rui's obviously better as an offensive player. Wouldn't know if he can match up defensively the same. Like it's fun to think about. I don't necessarily know if it changes much in terms of what this core is trying to do. I think at the end of the day, the Raptors are in asset accumulation mode. That
Yeah.
should be the main priority for this. Just don't take on bad money and accumulate whatever assets you can for Bruce Brown. Again, like getting that second rounder from the Lakers is great. For Chris Boucher, he has a pretty favorable contract. It's expiring. I believe it's around 11 million. And so I think for him, like getting a second round pick would be great. If he keeps playing like this, if we can fleece some team into giving us a first rounder, that would be great. I tweeted that out as a joke. And like obviously I don't think a team's gonna give him a first round pick for Chris Boucher. But hey, man, he can offer a lot to a lot of teams.
Yeah.
Like obviously the Nuggets being interesting, they need more height. They need more 3-point shooting. Obviously, a team like the Kings, the Warriors. I'm even like I think about a team like the Orlando Magic, who've been just ravaged by so many injuries, and they
Mhm.
haven't been a great 3-point shooting like all season, anyways. So adding him in the front court as just a depth piece, I think would be awesome. And like you wouldn't have to give up a lot to get a guy like Chris Boucher. And at the end of the day, right now he's like a 10th, ninth man for the Raptors.
Mhm.
But for a contending team, he'll obviously drop down more like an 11th, 12th, 13th guy. But like he's great insurance to have. We know he's ready to just come in whenever asked of him. He's been in the doghouse with this organization for the last couple of seasons. But whenever he does play, for the most part, it's incredible energy. He just comes out and just does his job, and he's a professional about it. And I think a lot of teams could use that come towards the trade deadline and moving into the second half of the season. So my thing with Chris Boucher is like I think he deserves to be on a contender. I think he deserves to be playing meaningful minutes again. It's just not happening with the Raptors, and he's proven he can still be a contributor on a good team. So I'm buying it. I'm buying that the Raptors are shopping him out there, and I think teams are definitely interested in him. It's just like, can they get a package to come together for Chris Boucher? If it's with the Nuggets, I don't know what it would look like. I think they'd have to take on Zeke Nashi's money.
Mhm.
Not sure how much the Raptors would want to do that. I've seen Vladko Konchar's name come up, who, by the way, has a no trade clause. Konchar, of all people. I learned that this week, which was insane.
That's
I don't know how
crazy. Who's
his
his
agent
agent?
negotiated that, but good for him, I guess. But yeah, so I don't know what the deal would be with the Nuggets, but like I'm assuming for any trade for these guys, the Raptors are more focused on assets than
Mhm.
they are like middle of the pack players. No disrespect to a Hachimura or Gabe Vincent from the Lakers. I just don't know how much the Raptors are interested in taking on their money and how they would fit with the timeline of this team.
No, yeah, that's true too. Like I know Rui right now on the Lakers, he's kind of been kind of just like a 3 and D guy mainly, just a spot up three guy for when LeBron or someone kicks out. And I guess the Raptors could potentially open up more of his play style, but I just don't see where he would fit. And that's something I want to ask you too. Like I know we're having the tanking talks and someone like Cooper Flag, who just went off for I think it was
Oh my
what
god, that was
42 points.
insane game.
So they have him listed as a small forward, I believe. He's 6'9", small forward. If say he were to get drafted onto this team, does he immediately I guess we immediately put him over Jacoby Walter because he's Cooper Flag, of course. But then where does that leave a guy like Jacoby Walter on the team? How does he fit into this team? Because a lot of people are saying just tank for Flag, tank for Flag.
Look, I think that's a valid question in terms of fit and how it works. But like when a guy puts up 42 points, it's a new ACC freshman record. He like the first time since like JJ Redick, I think, as a Dookie, like scored over 40 or whatever it was. I don't even know. Shot 11 of 14 from the field, hit 4 threes, 6 rebounds, 7 assists. Like I'm just rattling off Cooper Flag's numbers because he was insane. I can go on and about it. But like when a guy's doing that, it doesn't matter. You get the guy, you put him in your lineup, and you go from there. Like, quite frankly, I think the bigger conversation is like who out of RJ Barrett or Grady Dick gets moved to the bench. If that happens, I think it's likely Grady Dick. I think he's a really good player. He can scale up and scale down when he needs to. I think he could do awesome in a bench role where defense is not as much of a burden on him. And we've seen kind of how he struggled with that and how he's kind of hitting this sophomore slump right now. So I think that's more of a conversation for Jacoby Walter and the rest of the guys. You shuffle down and the team reevaluates. If it's almost like a Cam Whitmore situation with the Rockets. The Rockets have so many good young guys, and that's a good problem to have. There's probably going to be one that doesn't like where their spot is in their rotation, doesn't feel like they're getting treated right. And what is that team going to do, or a good team does? They'll probably flip them for some positive assets. Like that's just what it comes down to. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Jacoby Walter or any of these other guys, but that's a good problem to encounter, and you want those situations. Like you look at the way Cooper Flag played, you get that guy. Like he is just far and away the best prospect in this draft. No disrespect to Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, all the other guys, but Cooper Flag just looks phenomenal. There was conversations about like, oh, his offensive ceiling seems limited, and then his jumper started falling. And then he started yamming on guys. And all of a sudden, it's like, what are we talking about here? Like, he's been hitting his threes consistently. He gets to the line like a maniac now. That last game against Notre Dame, he got 17 free throws, made 16 of them. And on defense, he is a monster. He leads the ACC in stocks. His defensive win shares and defensive rating best in the country. Like, this guy is doing everything on both ends of the floor. And I know you didn't bring up this question to just for me to rant about Cooper Flag, but like that's my point. Like he solves problems. Like that's what he's showing with Duke, and that's what he would do. Like fit be damned. Like when you have a guy that good, you make it work, and he will probably solve a lot of your problems anyways.
Do you think the power, like obviously the hierarchy shifts when it comes to guys like RJ and IQ, but how do you think the hierarchy would shift when it comes to someone like Scotty and Cooper Flag? Because we both know they're tremendous players. I know it's still probably Scotty's the face of the franchise, but Cooper is so great. I think there might be a possibility that can suddenly shift if Scotty doesn't take that All-Star to MVP leap at least.
Yeah, look, again, all these things are very fluid, and you're right. Like if Cooper Flag comes in and starts balling and is leading the way, then like eventually that's gonna organically just naturally change. He's just gonna start like I wouldn't say he's cannibalizing or taking some of that stuff away from Scotty Barnes, but just like if he starts having success in those ways, then yeah, they're gonna reevaluate and things are gonna shift, and that happens naturally. But like there's also the way that like these guys can just figure out how to play together as they start getting those reps too. Like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum with the Celtics, two wing players who kind of get their shots in similar ways in a lot of their games. They learn to play next to each other. They learn to kind of go one night on, one night off, whatever the case may be, or just being next to each other. And it made sense. Like that can be the same thing here. It's going to be interesting because both Scotty Barnes and Cooper Flag aren't exactly knockdown shooters. So, excuse me. It depends on like how they space around them and what happens there. But like if one of them even just starts hitting the three at a better rate, and again, Cooper Flag's jumper has been falling of late. We don't know if it's sustainable or if it's going to translate to the NBA level. But if that continues, or Scotty, we know how much time and how many reps he's putting into his 3-point shooting this season. If that starts falling better, that changes things even more. And then all of a sudden, this problem we're seeing of these guys fitting next to each other doesn't seem as much of a problem. All that stuff to say is fluid, and it's going to change as these guys come together. I just want it to happen. Like, honestly, like we're hypothesizing about fit and can they do this? Can they do that? We don't even know if they're going to get the guy yet. Right now, the Raptors have an 80% chance at a top 5 pick, which is great. There's a lot of good players that can get with that, but everyone wants the number 1 pick. I am not a proponent of outright tanking, but let's be honest, they won 8 games. They're tied for the second worst record. making a play-in game isn't likely. And even if you made a push for it, there's no goodwill or moral victory you're going to get by making a play-in game at this point. It's going to do nothing for your franchise. So you may as well lean into the situation you're in while getting these reps, hopefully no more injuries, and try to get the guy. That's all I want to say. Like, I don't care about any of the problems. I don't care about fit this, fit that, hierarchy, pecking order, whatever. Just get the guy. Do everything you can to get the guy.
I'm just manifesting. I'm just acting like he's already selected. Like we already got the number one draft, and he's coming to Toronto. I just gotta manifest this guy onto our team, bro. Toronto would blow up if that happened, man. Oh, bro, just even thinking about it. Like,
Adam Silver, I will
rig the draft.
massage your back. I will write a handwritten. I don't even know what I would. I'm about to say something stupid if I keep this going. But Adam Silver, I'm begging you, the basketball gods, I am pleading with you. Put Cooper Flag in Toronto. Put him in this market. I promise you it will do great things for the NBA. It'll be great for this franchise. Just please make it happen. And also, on a side note, don't let the Spurs get him. I saw a random person theorize this about what if the Spurs end up? I don't think they're in a great lottery spot for it to happen. Obviously, it's lottery and who knows. But it's Cooper Flag and Victor Wembanyama on the Spurs. I would quit. I would quit basketball.
It's rigged.
But, that's what I want to say. Just please, Adam Silver, basketball gods out there, if you're listening, just make this happen.
Exactly. Just. Oh man, we're just thinking of a team that bring back those 2019 vibes where all the vibes were just hyped. We're excited for the future before everything went downhill. But anyways, moving on to those boys at the 905. I know they had a few interesting games this week.
Yeah, so we're here to bring you the 905 report now, and it was a fun week for the 905, Kyle. They had two games, both against the Maine Celtics, and they went perfect over the weekend. They swept Maine in those back-to-back games. The first one was a lot more dramatic as it took overtime in a game-winning free throw from Eugene Omarui, who finished with 20 points, and shout out to him. He's on a 10-day contract with the Raptors currently. And then the second victory was a much smoother win. The 905 dominated in the second half. They only led by 1 at the break, and then they outscored the Maine Celtics by 16 from that point. They got some really fun minutes from AJ Lawson in that one. The 905 are now 4-2 in the regular season and have moved up to 4th in the Eastern Conference. And now, Kyle, before we actually get into what stood out for the 905 this week, I just want to mention that if you haven't already seen it, go watch Cody Wiles' video essay on Ulrich Shamshay. It's 7 minutes. It won't take you a lot of time, but the amount of effort he put into that is just brilliantly well done. It's a great snapshot into Ulrich Shamshay's pro career so far. And it's just coverage and information you will not get anywhere else. And the proof is that he hand-tracked a lot of these stats. That is just insane dedication. Cody, you're a maniac and a sicko. We love you, and we're so glad to see that the video essay finally came out. And I think it was well worth the wait. So if you haven't checked it out, please go and do that after this video. But going back to the 905 as a whole, Kyle, I think the thing that really stood out to me this week is that the team got a bit of consistency with their roster, basically for the first time all year. They had the added boost of Mobo and Battle being down there on assignment for the most part. And then you have a guy like Eugene Omarui who's been sticking around even though he's on a 10-day contract. And the offense has just been much sharper. They've been executing better. This regular season, so these 6 games, they're averaging 113 points per game, basically 114. And then over their last 4 games since the calendar flipped in 2025, they put at least 115 in 3 of those 4 games. So it was a really fun weekend for them, and they're starting to kind of string these wins together, which is really nice to see. And I think it just shows that what this team can be capable of when they have that talent available.
Exactly. I think that's what they kind of really needed because we've seen the 905, so many players were shifting, coming and going, waves getting called up, or they just didn't have a set lineup. Now they got their feet under them. They're, like you said, they're stringing together these wins. They're gelling. They're building that chemistry together. A lot of guys are knowing how each other plays, and it's just overall just getting the reps in there. Growing as a team, knowing how these guys play, and I think that's one of the most important things at all. That's what you want when you look at the Raptors or the 905, I should say, that these people are developing, like Shamshay himself. I know Cody's a prophet over here. This guy was hand tracking those stats, sicko behavior. When I heard that, I was like, no way. But even though he didn't have the craziest stat lines, he had multiple blocks. It was 17 rebounds he had or something like that, something crazy. Yeah. So just watching him play, and he's not putting up the most points for you, but he's getting those reps and he's developing as a player. You could see the potential there, how much he can grow and how much he can actually deliver to this team. And I'm surprised myself too. I thought Frank Kaminsky would have been like called up by now because he's been playing seemingly decent for the team, and like I thought he would have been gone by now. That's why I wasn't even like, okay, he's helping out the team. I thought he was just doing this again to get a shot at the NBA. But he's been giving us good minutes, good stats, and overall the vibes are just up. The team looks like they're getting their foot under them and they're moving forward.
Yeah, the Frank Kaminsky part is interesting, like you mentioned. I think the thing with him is like he offers you a lot as an
Mhm.
offensive player. It's just defensively, like sometimes just because of his size, he can nab a couple blocks. He's not a
Yeah.
great rebounder or like just being a 7-footer, quite honestly. But again, he can have some really fun moments against the Celtics in that second game, that big win there. He started, I think, 3 for 3 from downtown. He hit his first three threes in the first quarter. He finished with 21 points. He went 5 for 9 from downtown by the end of the game. Like he's a really good shooter and he can stretch the floor, which is fun to see. So hopefully he can see an opportunity with the NBA team, even if it's not the Raptors soon. I think it's just more about getting consistency there. But I want to go back to Shamshay because you're right. It was a pretty fun, interesting weekend from him. He had two very different stat lines, but they kind of just show the different ways that he's progressing as a player.
Mhm.
So that first game against the Celtics, that overtime win, he finished with 13 points, 6 of 10 from the field, 8 rebounds, and 3 blocks. Just super active. And the things I really like seeing from him in that one were just like, he is trying to get more involved in the offense where he's just not standing still and setting screens. He's not just in the dunker spot. He's moving around and trying to find ways to fit. The instincts he shows on defense in terms of like how he can time things is starting to show. There was a play in the fourth quarter where he saw a player cutting with the ball baseline or driving, and then he kind of cut closer to the basket, caught it, hit a push shot in the fourth quarter. You're facing good pressure. It's a tight situation. For him to make a push shot, something you don't really see him often do in that situation, I think really spoke well to kind of him learning in real time. And that second game against Maine, again, not a great offensive night. He made 5 points. He shot 1 of 4, but he was still a plus 11. Obviously, grabbing 17 rebounds was a really big part of that. 8 of them came on the offensive end. But the biggest thing for me, and it wasn't even just the 2 blocks, it was just he was very disciplined after the first half. He sat early in the first half with 3 fouls in that second game. And then in the second half, he didn't commit a single foul. He was still contesting. He was just moving laterally very well. He was being smart about how to go about it. Even when he wasn't getting his hands on the ball, he was able to disrupt a lot of passes and lob attempts. And I think it just speaks to the kind of the real-time learning he's going through. We've harped on it a lot. Cody talks about it in his video essay too. He's 19, he's super young, but Coach Drew Jones keeps saying this kid is a sponge. He just takes information and deploys it so well and soaks up as much as he can. But I think for Shamshay specifically, it was a really fun weekend to keep showcasing some of that.
Exactly, like, and that's one of the main things, the ability to adapt and be disciplined. Like, he sees okay, maybe my offense isn't going the greatest. How can I affect this game in other ways, and how can I stop fouling? So to take that step back, adapt and evaluate and get better going forward. Okay, my shots aren't falling. Let me get in pace for the rebound. Let me box out. Let me turn up the energy on defense. And being so young too at the game and having the ability to realize that and adapt and not get frustrated that your shots aren't falling and like let me force my shots up. Let me get back in the offense. No, he knows where to be. He knows what to do, and it just shows growth. It just shows overall growth and confidence as a player. And it shows the ability that he has the potential to grow into something truly special.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun watching him. He just like every game, I swear, there's just like a different nugget from him of like, oh
Mhm.
wow, look at that. I haven't seen him do that before. And I think it's so cool. Like in that second game against the Celtics, there was just a pass that he made. He was in the mid post and he had like a little like dump off, like just
Mhm.
quick bounce pass just behind like his shoulder. And it was just right into the pocket of a cutting player. I think it was AJ Lawson who ended up missing the layup, but it was just such a clean pocket pass. And Shamshay is just showing he can kind of do more out of the mid post area. He's more comfortable putting his back to the basket and then making reads and decisions. Like this team is kind of putting him in positions now where like he can think a little bit. It's not
Mhm.
just like, oh, set my screen, move to the different spot, or like kind of here's the ball, take it from me, and kind of go on to the next part of the action. Like he's getting chances to think now and process with the ball in his hands. I think that's super exciting. So we're gonna hopefully see more of that. And this next game against Oklahoma City Blue on Monday should be a very good test for the 905 because they may not have some of these guys available. The Raptors injury report came out today. They also play on Monday, and everyone seems to be available. Usually they list the two ways and the guys on assignment to be in or out. Right now, nobody's out. So everyone looks like they're going to be there. All the two ways, Jamison Battle, AJ Lawson, or Shamshay, should be there with the Raptors. The 905 are quote unquote shorthanded, seemingly. So it's going to be a big, I guess, test for them against some of these other guys against the Oklahoma City Blue. Maybe Brendan Carlson's there, a familiar face. Jemias Ramsey, if you remember from last season, he's with the Oklahoma City Blue right now. So it should be a very fun game for them on Monday as well, and we'll see if they can keep up. But we're going to go back to the NBA Raptors and cover the schedule. And it's another tough week of matchups, Kyle, because the Raptors are taking on the Golden State Warriors on Monday, hosting Steph Curry and the Warriors, before welcoming the defending champion Celtics to Toronto on Wednesday. And then they take on the Milwaukee Bucks, Dame and Giannis on Friday. This is some real star power the Raptors are taking on this week. Kyle, what do you have your eyes on from this team?
I think it was a little like what Cody was saying last week, not seeing them play minutes together. But for me, it's just I want to see them get used to the starting lineup. I want to see them get their feet under them. And how do we respond from another winless week? Like, how does Darko adjust to this? How are we going to get this done? Because it feels like right now, like you said, we don't have really an identity. Our defense is lacking. It just kind of feels sometimes it gets stagnant on the offense as well. So I'm gonna look how they bounce back. Like they did give the Cavs a good game. They gave them a tough game. You know, like it was a loss, but you got to pull the positives from somewhere. So I'm hoping this week maybe they'll give someone like the Celtics a tough game. All I can ask for is really just this team gels together, builds the chemistry, and we just get better. That's all I can really ask for going ahead.
Yeah, look, they've given the Celtics a tough game before. I think one of the earlier games went to overtime, if I'm not mistaken, and they played them tough. Again, they're able to limit the Celtics' success from the three-point line in that game. So they've shown they can do it. There's evidence of it, so that'll be an interesting to see. And you kind of touched on my point a little bit. What I want to really see from this Raptors is to continue to form an identity. God knows we're not going to get it on defense. But on offense, this team, for all the losses, has started to kind of show things. So since Emmanuel Quickley's return, the offensive rating for this team is 12th in the NBA, which is much better than their season ranking, which is 24th. They've jumped 12 spots from where they are on the season just over Emmanuel Quickley's return, which is, I believe, 6 games. So the offense has been better. And this week is really going to be a test of that. You're playing 3 teams who are all within the top 10 in defensive rating this year. So these guys are obviously not going to make it easy on you when it comes to scoring the ball. But if you can't stop teams defensively, which the Raptors can't, then at least try to keep pace offensively. And that is clearly what the strength of these players are. Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Grady Dick, Scotty Barnes, all of them are phenomenal offensive players when things are making sense and clicking for them. So we really want to see more of that and kind of getting back to what this team can do. They started the season pretty well on offense, and I'm kind of hoping that with all these guys back, they should really be able to kind of replicate some of that success. So that's what I'm looking at. 3 really good defenses you're facing. It should be a good test. Can this offense kind of put things together?
And you know, it's so weird for me too. Like, if you look at the Raptors on paper, like it should be like it's so weird that their defense is so bad to me, because if you look, we have guys like Jacoby Walter, Jakob Pertl. You look at the frame of Scotty Barnes. You look at a guy like RJ Barrett. Like, I feel like we shouldn't be this bad on defense. It's like if you look at it on paper, but I don't like. It just sucks, man. It just sucks, bro. To watch us just get torched on defense.
Yeah, look, defense at the end of the day, it scheme and stuff is part of it, but like it also comes down to effort and being smart with your decision making. Some of the like help defense we're seeing isn't stuff that's being schemed up or isn't planned by the coaches. It's just guys digging in maybe when they shouldn't. They're coming to help when they maybe shouldn't, and it's not making sense. Some of it does pay off, but like I can only say scheme explain some of it. I know a lot of guys have talked about it. S talked about it in his recap of the Pistons game, where like a guy like RJ Barrett playing really high like ball pressure on a guy like Tobias Harris, and then he just gets beat to the middle and then gives up an easy up and under to Tobias. Like some of that, like the team wants you to apply a lot of pressure. Why you're not generating turnovers? So I don't understand why they want to keep doing it. Maybe it's just a style that Darko wants to play to kind of create things, but a lot of it is just effort and making sense. Like you said, RJ Barrett isn't a weak guy. We see him bully and just bulldoze players on the offensive end. But then every time K just gives him a shoulder bump and step back, there's like 6 feet of separation created. Why is that happening, RJ? You know what he's going to try to do to you. So like some of that is just being heads up and making smarter decisions on that end. Like good individual defenders can only take you so far. You kind of need to be able to do it as a collective. If you haven't done it recently, go back and just watch the 2019 championship Raptors. People have been kind of circulating clips of that team and what they were defensively. The way they rotate and move, it's just like I don't even know what the right word is. It's just so synchronous. Everyone is moving just completely in line with each other. It all clicks. No one has to really kind of tell each other what to do. They all know what's happening. But those were also very talented, very like seasoned players doing that. This roster and these guys are a lot younger, so it's kind of hard to expect that from them. But I think that would be a part of it, and hopefully we'll see some of that as things go. I wouldn't bank on this team becoming great defensively with this starting unit, but you never know. Maybe they can surprise us. They are young. But offensively, I think there's a chance of an identity being built there.
Yeah, I honestly think we have the building blocks to a good defensive team. It just we gotta again, like you said, we gotta figure out that identity. We haven't played together that much too, so again, these guys don't know too much about the defensive tendencies, things like that. And again, it could just come down to scheming situations. We just have to build up the foundation. But that's all we can ask for going forward. We just need to figure out some sort of identity this next week, at least, or next few months.
Yeah, fingers crossed the Raptors can do that. But I think that's a good spot to end it on, Kyle. That does it us for this week. We want to thank everyone for tuning in to another edition of Run It Back on the Raptors Republic Network. We hope you're caught up on everything. And we'll be back next week to recap this week's action. So make sure you stay tuned. Subscribe to the Raptors Republic YouTube channel for your daily fix of coverage. It obviously goes a long way to get our work to new people. And obviously, the rest of the Raptors Republic crew will be updating the channel. Obviously, we're talking about stuff like earlier Shamshay video essay from Cody. S and Samson will have their weekly content as well, so be on the lookout for that. And make sure you check out the Raptors Republic website as well for your daily news, analysis, and opinions. But that does it for us. Have a great week. We'll be back next time to run it back. Peace.